And good morning. I'm Ariel Castro. Thanks for joining me this morning. Of course, we're continuing to monitor what's happening in Cleveland, Ohio right now. Inside a courtroom, the sentencing phase is taking place for Ariel Castro, the man accused of holding 3 women hostage for more than a decade. On the stand, well, let me introduce our guests right now. With me now is Tanya Miller, former prosecutor, Paige Pate, a defense attorney, and Doug Berman. He's also a defense attorney and a sentencing expert. He's live in Columbus, Ohio. Also, Dr. Jeff Gardier. He's a psychologist who can help us ferret through some of this very difficult testimony. On the stand right now is Dr. Gerald Maloney. He was the ER doctor at the Cleveland Hospital. Of course, these 3 victims were brought to that hospital for treatment after they were rescued from that house of horrors. Let's listen to his testimony.
Yes, they had forensic exams done by a sexual assault nurse examiner.
And when you say they, are you referring to all 4 patients?
All 3 patients, minor child did not.
What would you say you observed, if anything, about their general demeanor? I know you've explained quite well for us about Michelle Knight. What about the other 2?
The other 2 were also distraught. Again, there was a mix of distraught and also elation that they were free now after years of captivity. But they were distraught, they were tearful, and they were very much emotionally fragile at the time they arrived.
And you were given information about a period of prolonged captivity. Was there any sort of documentation that you made of them, in addition to their gaunt appearance, that would lead to that they had been captive for such a period of time?
In addition to the gaunt appearance, and also again specifically Miss Knight had several bruises which indicated that she had undergone physical abuse as well. All 3 of them looked fairly gaunt. All 3 of them related that they had been allowed minimal time outside the house at all. All 3 were very pale as well. So there is corroborating physical evidence to support their reported period of captivity.
And do you recall the date after that you saw these patients?
It was May 6th of 2013.
Without getting into specific detail, were there narratives or more documentation given to you with regards to what sort of sexual assault the women underwent?
Yes, they related information regarding the sexual assaults to us and also to the sexual assault nurse examiner.
And in a very general description of what nature were those assaults?
Forceful rape.
And are you able to get any more specific as far as what type?
All 3 of them were raped. All 3 of them were raped vaginally. Was what they reported. Multiple repeated times. Again, it was all against their will under threat of physical harm, what they related.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state would next present Detective Andrew Karasimchuk of the Cleveland Police Department Sex Crimes Unit. He will be presented by Assistant Prosecutor Max Martin.
All right, I want to clue you into exactly what's going on, and I have my panel of experts here to help me do that. And Paige Pate, I'll start with you. So the prosecution is putting a series of witnesses on the stand to prove what?
Well, they're trying to lay out their case. This is almost like a mini trial. It's like they're going through the process of presenting the evidence that they would if the case had gone to trial. Now, normally you would see if the case was going to trial, the defense lawyer standing up and cross-examining these witnesses, but they're just sitting there and they're taking it. They know they have to get through this process. The state has a right to do it, and at some point later in the day, we're going to hear from Mr. Castro.
Exactly. He wants to stand up and apparently apologize for what he's done and to show another side of himself, which is really hard to digest, I must say. Dr. Jeff Gardier, I want to bring you in because the defense has been arguing that this proceeding will actually be harmful to the victims because they'll have to relive it. Is the defense right?
In some cases, it may harm the victims. However, the victims are prepared for this. We know that they have invested themselves into their recovery, and in some ways, this is something that they're waiting for. They're waiting for this monster to actually take full responsibility for what he did. They don't really care about the apology. They just want him to say that he did do this and own up to it. And I have to point out, Carol, one other thing. Time has passed here, and people are starting to forget the monstrosity and the horror of this. And what the prosecution is doing is reminding these people that these women were tortured physically, sexually, and emotionally, and this was one of the crimes of the century.
And Jeff, I want to ask you too about Michelle Knight, one of the victims in this case. She may appear in person in the courtroom to give her say, to tell a little bit about what happened to her and how it affected her and her family. I find that unbelievably courageous that a woman who's been through this hell, and keep in mind, this man kept her in a darkened room for much of the time. She was chained up, fed her once a day. She became pregnant, and he just he made her go through these series of exercises in order to abort the baby. She's been through such horrible things, yet she may be willing to appear in this courtroom full face and face this man who tortured her.
That's right. The person who did these horrible things to her and to the other two captives now are able to step up. In this case, it'll be Michelle Knight, who will say, I am not afraid of you, and I will tell you exactly what you did to me and the impact on my life now, tomorrow, and forever, except that I am able to move on. And that is powerful, it's courageous, and it shows the people who are watching this, and especially for this sentencing, that this is not just about second-person related events, but first-person, what she and the other two actually experienced, and why this man needs to be put behind bars forever and ever.
The other interesting thing that we saw inside the courtroom, Tanya, was a model of Ariel Castro's house. And this is quite unusual at a sentencing hearing, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, and like Paige was saying, this is really sort of a mini trial. And normally when prosecutors have these kinds of demonstrative exhibits, it's to illustrate for the jury, and in this case, the public, what actually happened. It just brings everything to life for the public.
So defense attorneys, Paige, are sitting there helplessly, listening, watching, and do they want their client to talk?
Usually not, especially if you don't know what the sentence is going to be. Almost anything he can say at this point is not going to help him. It's going to hurt him. You know, normally when I'm listening to this type of evidence, it's the worst time to be a defense lawyer. You're slinking down in your chair. You're saying, let's at least get this over with. But they also have to present a case for Mr. Castro. And I heard the lawyer say earlier, mental illness. We know something's wrong with this man. So I expect when it's their turn, we're going to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, I got to take another break. We'll be back with much more live from Cleveland. We'll also talk about Edward Snowden, who finally left the Moscow airport. We'll be right back.